Galatians 5:24. Those who are Christ have crucified the flesh with its passions and desires. So from what does God offer us deliverance in that verse? From the flesh. That's right. Now we need to say a little bit about the use of that phrase, the flesh, in the New Testament. There are certain phrases in the New Testament that are used with a special meaning. And in order to understand it, you have to realize what that meaning is. Sometimes in the New Testament, the word flesh is used simply of our natural physical body. But at other times, it's used with a different but connected sense. It's used about the nature that was born with us when this body was born. It's a nature descended from our first parent, Adam, and it's the nature of a rebel. Inside every descendant of Adam, somewhere there is a rebel. And this rebel is called the flesh or the fleshly nature. It's all called the body of sin, the body of the sins of the flesh, and the old man. So there are 5 different phrases in the New Testament, but all of them essentially refer to the same thing, made from different aspects. Let's just look at them again for a moment. Flesh, the body of sin, the body of the sins of the flesh, and the old man. And the essential feature in common is that they are the expression of rebellion. Adam rebelled against God before he ever had any children. And every descendant of Adam is born with the nature of a rebel somewhere inside. And you know what God's remedy for the rebel is? He only has one. He doesn't send him to church. That's right. I use a stronger word, execution. But the measure of mercy is the execution took place when Jesus died on the cross. Perhaps you need to look there, your finger in Galatians for a moment. I think it's important that you look at this. Romans chapter 6. And verse 6. Knowing this, the problem is that multitudes of Christians don't know it. Knowing this, that our old man was crucified with him, the body of sin might be done away, that we should no longer be slaves of sin. You've got 2 of the phrases there, the old man, the body of sin. In the eternal counsels of God, when Jesus died on the cross, our old Adamic rebellious nature put to death in him. That's the way of deliverance from that nature. See, lots of Christians who attend church on Sunday believe that somehow or other God forgives their sins. I was attending the Anglican Church in Britain, and somehow or other I believe that something happened when we said every Sunday morning, "Pardon us, miserable offenders." But I knew perfectly well that I was going to go out of church and go on committing the same sins. So after a while I said to myself, I wonder which provokes God more, not to confess my sins, or to confess them and go on doing them. And in the end, I decided that all Christianity had to offer, it was not for me. You see, nobody was there to tell me that God not merely forgives our past sins, that's wonderful, but he also deals with the rebel. And when the rebel has been put to death, you don't need to go on committing the same rebellious acts. That's God's provision, deliverance from the old Adamic nature. And so in verse 11 of Romans chapter 6, Paul says, likewise you also reckon yourselves to be dead indeed to sin, but alive to God. First of all, you have to know it. That's Romans 6 verse 6. Second, you have to reckon it. You've got to apply it to yourself. You've got to believe it's true in you. If you don't know it, you can't reckon it. Now let's go back to Galatians 5:24. It says, those who are Christ have a certain distinctive mark. What is it? They have crucified the flesh. You see, there's always two aspects to the provision of God through the cross. One is what God has already done. The other is our applying it in our own lives. So God has made the provision, we have to apply it. In Romans 6 it says, our old man was crucified, but in Galatians 5 it says, those who are Christ have crucified. They have done it. They have crucified the flesh with its passions and desires. There is something we have to do. And notice that this is the mark of those who are Christ. What is it? It's not that they're Catholics or Protestants or Baptists or Pentecostals, but they have crucified the flesh. That marks out those who truly belong to Jesus Christ. In 1 Corinthians 15, keep your finger in Galatians, we'll probably be back there. In 1 Corinthians 15, Paul says something about those who will be ready to Christ when he returns. 1 Corinthians 15 and verse 23. Talking about the resurrection, he says, each one in his own order. Christ, the first fruits, he's already resurrected. Afterwards, those who are Christ's at his coming. Notice he uses exactly the same phrase in 1 Corinthians 15 and Galatians 5. What is the mark of those who are Christ? Those who will be ready for Jesus when he comes? They have done what? Crucified the flesh. So here is a vital application of the cross in our lives. Turn now to Romans chapter 8. You'll notice that we go backwards and forwards between Romans and Galatians because these are the two epistles that deal with this theme. Romans chapter 8, verse 8 and verse 12 and 13. Romans 8 says, so then those who are in the flesh cannot please God. Those in whom the fleshly nature is still alive and active, those who are dominated by the flesh cannot please. They may try ever so hard. They may try to keep all the rules, make all the good resolutions, but they cannot please God because the fleshly nature is in rebellion against God and is not subject to the law of God and cannot be. But Paul goes on in the same chapter, verse 12 and 13, therefore, brethren, we are debtors, not to the flesh, to live according to the flesh. We owe nothing to our carnal nature. All it's caused us is problems. So don't spend all your time petting your carnal nature, because you owe nothing. For if you live according to the flesh, that means if you let your fleshly nature continue to control you, you will die. The end of that is death. But if by the Spirit, the Holy Spirit, you put to death the deeds of the body, you will live. Notice again, Paul is talking about the body as an alternative phrase for the flesh. He's not talking about literally putting your physical body to death. He's talking about dealing with that nature, the old Adamic nature. And he says, if through the Holy Spirit you put that nature to death, you will live. Notice, we're dependent on the Holy Spirit. We cannot do it by our own carnal efforts. But on the other, the Holy Spirit will not for us if we do not will to do it. It's one of those areas where there has to be cooperation between the Spirit and our will. We've got to know God's vision, we've got to believe it, we've got to reckon it, and we've got to actually enforce that provision on our carnal nature through the Spirit. So we're talking about